I'm Amber Wilson, 28, the perpetual second-place finisher in my family's affections. When the invitation arrived to attend a family financial meeting at Grandpa Maxwell's estate, my stomach twisted with both hope and dread. Despite my architecture degree and work ethic, my parents only had eyes for my sister Harper. That weekend at the New Hampshire estate would change everything. Before I continue my story, I'd love to know where you're watching from. Hit like and subscribe to join me on this wild journey of family drama and unexpected justice. Growing up as a Wilson meant privilege, but in my case, it also meant constantly living in a shadow. Our family home in Connecticut sprawled across 5 acres, with a pool, tennis court, and separate wings that allowed Harper and me to avoid each other when tensions ran high. Which was often. From our earliest years, the pattern was clear. Harper, 3 years older, commanded attention effortlessly. When she won her first equestrian competition at age 7, my parents threw her a party that made local society pages. When I won the state science fair at 9, they missed the ceremony entirely because Harper had a minor cold. "That's wonderful, Amber," my mother Catherine would say, barely glancing up from her charity committee notes when I brought home straight A's. "But could you keep it down? Harper is practicing her cello." My father Richard, CEO of Wilson Financial Group, built the company from the solid foundation my grandfather Maxwell had established. He had plans for Harper from the moment she could talk. My future CEO, he'd call her, beaming with pride as she sat in his office pretending to take calls on a toy phone. I'd been invisible in that office, quietly building intricate structures with building blocks in the corner. Even then, my architectural dreams were taking shape, but no one noticed except my grandfather. Maxwell Wilson wasn't like his son. He'd built his wealth from nothing, starting as a construction worker before founding a small investment firm that grew steadily through the decades. Perhaps that's why he noticed my creative efforts, my determination, my quiet persistence. "You've got good hands and a better mind, little one," he told me once, examining a detailed cardboard city I'd constructed. "Buildings need to be beautiful, but they also need to stand strong when the winds come." Those moments with Grandpa Maxwell sustained me through a childhood of being compared to Harper and found wanting. His visits were rare as he maintained residences across the country, but each one gave me strength to continue pursuing my own path despite my parents' indifference. By the time I reached high school, I'd stopped seeking my parents' approval. I channeled my energy into academics, graduating as valedictorian. My speech that day was attended by my grandfather, who flew in specially, while my parents arrived late because Harper's hair appointment ran long. College brought freedom and validation. At Cornell's architecture program, my designs won recognition. My professors praised my innovative approach to sustainable urban housing. For once, I felt seen. Meanwhile, Harper attended business school, preparing to join our father at Wilson Financial. After graduation, I refused my father's half-hearted offer to find something for me at the company. Instead, I joined Foster & Blaine, a mid-sized architecture firm in Boston specializing in community-centered design. My starting salary was a fraction of what Harper received upon joining the family business, but it was mine, earned on merit alone. The past 2 years had been challenging. My major project, a mixed-use development designed to revitalize a struggling neighborhood, lost funding when investors pulled out. My team was disbanded, my confidence shaken. Simultaneously, my engagement to James, a fellow architect, imploded when he accepted a position in Singapore without discussing it with me first. "You could always come back to the family business," my father suggested during a rare call after hearing about my professional setbacks. The conversation lasted 3 minutes before he excused himself to take an important call from Harper. I was still rebuilding my life when the call came from Stanford Green, my grandfather's longtime attorney. "Your grandfather requests your presence this weekend at Lakeview Estate," he said, his formal tone revealing nothing. "It's regarding family financial matters. Everyone will be there." The last family gathering had been Thanksgiving, a tense affair where Harper monopolized conversation with tales of her corporate triumphs while my parents gazed at her adoringly. I'd left early, citing work commitments that didn't actually exist. But refusing my grandfather wasn't an option. He'd recently turned 80, and though he rarely discussed health matters, family gossip suggested he'd been consulting specialists. Perhaps this meeting concerned his estate planning. The drive to New Hampshire that Friday afternoon gave me too much time to think. Would this weekend bring more of the same family dynamics, or was change in the air? As the gates of Lakeview Estate came into view, I took a deep breath, preparing myself for whatever awaited inside. The gravel crunched beneath my tires as I pulled into the circular driveway of Lakeview Estate. The imposing Georgian mansion, with its symmetrical wings and stately columns, had always intimidated me despite the happy memories I'd formed here with Grandpa Maxwell during summer visits. Jackson, the longtime estate manager, appeared before I'd even turned off the engine. "Miss Amber," he said warmly, opening my door. "So good to see you again. Your grandfather will be pleased you've arrived safely." "Thanks, Jackson. How is he doing?" A brief shadow crossed Jackson's face. "He has good days and challenging ones. Today is better than most." I nodded, understanding the unspoken message. Whatever this gathering was about, Grandpa's health was likely a factor. The grand foyer was already buzzing with family members. Aunt Judith, my father's sister, offered a genuine hug. Uncle Thomas, my mother's brother, nodded politely from across the room where he nursed a whiskey. Various cousins, some I hadn't seen in years, milled about in small conversational clusters. "Well, look who finally showed up," came my sister's voice from the staircase. Harper descended with theatrical grace, every inch the corporate princess in her designer outfit and perfectly styled hair. At 31, she had our mother's classic beauty paired with our father's calculating eyes. "Hello, Harper," I said, maintaining a neutral tone. "Good to see you too." "Is it?" She air-kissed my cheek. "Love the casual look you've got going. So brave of you." I resisted touching my simple blouse and slacks, refusing to let her make me feel inadequate within 5 minutes of arrival. My parents emerged from the library, their expressions shifting from animation to polite acknowledgement when they spotted me. "Amber, you made it," my mother Catherine said, as though my attendance had been uncertain. She kissed the air near my cheek, careful not to smudge her immaculate makeup. My father gave my shoulder an awkward pat. "Traffic wasn't too bad, I hope?" "It was fine, Dad." "Good, good." His attention was already wandering. "Harper, there you are. Stanford was just asking about those projections you prepared." Just like that, I was forgotten again as they swept Harper back toward the library, peppering her with questions about work matters. "Something's never changed. Don't let them get to you." The gruff voice came from behind me. I turned to find Grandpa Maxwell watching from his wheelchair, a plaid blanket across his knees despite the warm spring evening. His eyes, however, remained as sharp and observant as ever beneath bushy white eyebrows. "Grandpa." I knelt beside him, embracing him carefully. He felt frilier than at Thanksgiving, his once powerful frame diminished. But his grip, when he squeezed my hand, remained surprisingly strong. "My girl," he said softly. "The only one who bothers to hug me properly instead of hovering awkwardly like I might shatter." "Never been much for hovering," I replied, which made him chuckle. "That's why you're my favorite, though don't tell the others." He winked, then grew more serious. "There's much to discuss this weekend, Amber. But first, dinner. I requested your favorite." Dinner was served in the formal dining room, a cavernous space featuring an antique table that could seat 30. Tonight, only 12 places were set, creating intimate groupings along the polished mahogany expanse. I found myself seated between Cousin Patrick, harmlessly dull with his endless talk of golf handicaps, and Aunt Judith, who at least asked genuine questions about my work and life. Across from me, my parents flanked Harper, creating a power trio that dominated conversation. Wilson Financial just acquired Denning Systems, my father announced proudly. Harper led the negotiations. Brilliant work, absolutely brilliant. It was nothing, Harper demurred with practiced modesty. Just applied what you taught me, Daddy. Nothing. My mother touched her pearls dramatically. She saved us $5 million on the deal. The board was stunned. Speaking of the board, my father continued, they're voting next month on creating a new executive position. Chief Strategy Officer. Harper's the obvious choice. The conversation continued in this vein throughout the first 3 courses, a carefully orchestrated performance designed to highlight Harper's business acumen and our parents' pride. Occasionally, someone would remember my existence and lob a polite question my way. "And how is your drawing going, Amber?" my mother asked as dessert was served. "I'm an architect, Mom. I design buildings, not sketches," I corrected gently. "The community center project is back on track with new funding, actually. We break ground next month." "How nice," she replied vaguely, before immediately turning to Harper. "Tell everyone about the Hong Kong deal, darling." I caught Grandpa Maxwell watching this exchange, his expression unreadable. When our eyes met, he gave me a subtle nod that somehow conveyed both apology and patience. After dinner, most of the family retired to the drawing room for drinks. I excused myself for a walk in the gardens, needing fresh air and solitude to prepare for whatever tomorrow would bring. As I passed the library, I overheard voices from within. The door stood slightly ajar, and my parents' and Harper's voices carried clearly. "Stanford confirmed it," my father was saying. "Dad's revised his estate plan. The announcement tomorrow is major." "Did he tell you the details?" Harper asked. "Not everything, but he implied we'd be pleased with the arrangements. Something about recognizing true business leadership." My mother's voice chimed in. "It's only right. Harper's been groomed to lead the company. The inheritance should reflect that." "What about Amber?" Harper asked, surprising me. My father scoffed. "What about her? She chose her path. Can't expect the same consideration when she's contributed nothing to the family legacy." "Richard," my mother cautioned. "She is still your daughter. And I've provided for her accordingly. College, living expenses when she needed it. But this is different. This is about the future of everything we've built." "Of course, Daddy," Harper soothed. "I just wanted to make sure we're prepared for any awkwardness tomorrow." "Leave that to me," he replied confidently. "Now, about the restructuring plan for the Asian markets." I backed away silently, my chest tight with familiar pain. Nothing had changed. Nothing would ever change with them. I retreated to my room, suddenly exhausted by the prospect of facing tomorrow's announcement and the confirmation of what I'd always known. In my family's eyes, I would always be an afterthought. Saturday morning dawned bright and clear, sunlight glinting off the lake that gave the estate its name. I'd slept poorly, my dreams troubled by fragments of the conversation I'd overheard. After a quick run along the property's wooded trails, I showered and dressed with care, choosing a simple but elegant navy dress that projected quiet confidence I didn't entirely feel. Breakfast was a subdued affair. Family members drifted in and out of the sunroom where a buffet had been arranged, everyone aware that the real purpose of our gathering would soon be addressed. Harper held court at the center table, looking fresh despite mentioning the late-night strategy session she'd had with our father. My mother fluttered around her, ensuring her coffee cup remained filled while ignoring everyone else's empty ones. At precisely 10 o'clock, Jackson appeared at the entrance. "Mr. Wilson requests everyone's presence in the library in 15 minutes, he announced formally. The room immediately buzzed with speculative whispers. I finished my toast in silence, preparing myself for what would likely be another exercise in family disappointment. The library was my grandfather's domain, a 2-story space lined with leather-bound volumes and dominated by an enormous desk carved from a single redwood. Today, the furniture had been rearranged to create a semicircle of chairs facing the desk, behind which sat Stanford Green, my grandfather's attorney, organizing documents with meticulous precision. Grandpa Maxwell was already positioned at the head of the arrangement in his wheelchair, looking more formal than I'd seen him in years in a crisp suit and burgundy tie. He nodded slightly as I entered, his expression giving nothing away. Once everyone was settled, Stanford cleared his throat. Thank you all for gathering today at Mr. Wilson's request. Before we begin the formal proceedings regarding Mr. Wilson's estate planning, he has asked that the family be given time for any personal financial announcements. This deviation from expected protocol caused confused glances among the relatives. My father, however, straightened in his chair and exchanged a knowing look with my mother. Actually, my father said, rising to his feet, Catherine and I would like to take this opportunity to address a matter we've been considering for some time. He moved to stand beside my grandfather, though his focus remained on the assembled family rather than his father. As you all know, Wilson Financial has flourished under the leadership legacy established by my father and continued through my tenure. With an eye toward the future and in recognition of the next generation's contributions, Catherine and I have decided to distribute a significant portion of our personal assets now, rather than waiting for the traditional inheritance process. Murmurs rippled through the room. Early inheritance distributions weren't unheard of in wealthy families, but they typically coincided with significant life events like marriages or milestone birthdays. My father produced an envelope from his jacket. We've been blessed with 2 daughters, both of whom we're immensely proud. His gaze rested briefly on me before shifting to Harper, where it lingered with unmistakable preference. However, one has demonstrated exceptional commitment to our family's legacy. One has sacrificed personal pursuits to ensure Wilson Financial thrives for generations to come. One has proven herself not just as a daughter, but as a true steward of everything we value. The direction of his speech was painfully clear, but I maintained my composure, hands folded tightly in my lap. Therefore, Catherine and I are allocating $5 million from our personal holdings to Harper, effective immediately. My mother handed my father a blue folder, which he presented to Harper with ceremonial gravity. This will allow her greater flexibility in her strategic vision for the company and recognize her unparalleled dedication. Harper accepted the folder with practiced humility. Thank you, Daddy, Mom. I'm honored by your trust and will continue to uphold our family's standards of excellence. A smattering of applause broke out among some relatives. Others looked uncomfortable, glancing between Harper's triumphant smile and my carefully neutral expression. Amber, my father turned to me as an apparent afterthought. While your chosen career path hasn't aligned with family interests, we do wish you well. Perhaps this will motivate you to work harder and achieve the kind of success your sister has demonstrated is possible. The words stung like a physical slap. Not just the obvious favoritism, which I'd long ago accepted, but the implication that I hadn't worked hard or achieved success on my own terms. My architecture career might not generate the profits of Wilson Financial, but I'd earned every opportunity through talent and dedication, not family connections. A hot flush crept up my neck as conversation resumed around me. Harper was already discussing how she might leverage her windfall for maximum company benefit. My mother nodded encouragingly while shooting occasional glances my way, perhaps belatedly aware of how the situation appeared to others. I rose quietly, intending to slip out unnoticed. I needed air, space to process yet another confirmation of my place in the family hierarchy. As I reached the door, however, a commotion behind me drew everyone's attention. My grandfather had raised his hand, the simple gesture somehow commanding immediate silence despite his physical frailty. With visible effort, he gripped the arms of his wheelchair and slowly, deliberately pushed himself to standing. Dad, please, my father started forward. There's no need to strain yourself. Grandpa Maxwell waved him off with surprising firmness. I can stand on my own 2 feet, Richard. Something I'm not sure you've ever truly done." The shocking rebuke froze my father mid-step. The room fell into stunned silence as my grandfather steadied himself, one hand resting on his desk for support. "I've sat here today and watched a display that has confirmed my worst fears about what's become of this family," he said, his voice gaining strength with each word. "About what's become of the values I thought I'd instilled in my son." His gaze swept the room, lingering particularly on my parents and Harper before finding me still paused by the door. "Amber, please come back and take a seat. What I have to say concerns you most of all." The walk back to my seat felt endless. Every eye in the room followed my progress as I moved carefully across the Persian rug, conscious of the dramatic shift in atmosphere. I settled into a chair directly across from my grandfather, who remained standing despite visible effort. "Maxwell, perhaps you should sit," Stanford suggested gently. "We can take a brief recess before continuing." "I'll stand for this," my grandfather replied firmly. Some moments in life demand that a man stand on his own 2 feet, no matter the cost. He straightened his shoulders, suddenly looking much more like the commanding figure from my childhood memories than the frilier version who had greeted me yesterday. "I founded Wilson Investments 60 years ago with $200 and a belief that integrity was as valuable as capital," he began. "When I brought Richard into the business, I thought I'd successfully passed on not just my financial knowledge, but my principles." My father shifted uncomfortably. "Dad, this isn't the time for a business history lesson." Silence. The single word, not shouted but delivered with unmistakable authority, cut through the room. My father actually flinched. "I've watched and waited, Richard. For years, I've observed how you've run both the business and this family. I kept hoping you'd remember what truly matters. Today has proven beyond doubt that you've forgotten entirely." Grandpa Maxwell turned his attention to me, his expression softening slightly. "Amber, from the time you were small, building those intricate structures on my office floor, I've seen something in you that reminded me of myself. Not ambition for ambition's sake, but a desire to create something meaningful, something that improves lives." A lump formed in my throat as he continued. "I've followed your career quietly. Your sustainable housing initiatives. The community center in that struggling Boston neighborhood. The pro bono work designing transitional housing for domestic violence survivors. All accomplished without family connections or the Wilson name opening doors." I blinked rapidly, shocked that he knew these details. Some of those projects weren't even publicized. Meanwhile, he turned toward Harper, who immediately sat straighter. "I've also observed how others conduct themselves when they think no one of consequence is watching." My sister's confident smile faltered slightly. "The Denning Systems acquisition you're so proud of? Did you tell your father how you obtained their confidential financial projections? Or how you threatened their HR director with exposing his affair unless he provided internal documents?" Harper's face drained of color. "Grandpa, business negotiations are complex. Sometimes aggressive tactics are necessary. Dishonesty is never necessary," he countered sharply. "Nor is taking credit for others' work, as you did with the Singapore expansion that was actually developed by your team member Julia, whom you later had transferred when she questioned your methods." My parents looked stunned. My father started to object, but Grandpa silenced him with a raised hand. "I've had investigators documenting everything for years. Not just business practices, but personal character. The true measure of a legacy isn't profit margins, Richard. It's the impact we have on others. The integrity with which we conduct ourselves when no one is watching." Grandfather reached inside his jacket and withdrew an envelope. Unlike my father's earlier theatrical presentation, this was a simple white business envelope, unadorned except for my name written in his distinctive handwriting. "Amber, please." On unsteady legs, I rose and accepted the envelope from him. It felt substantial in my hands. "Open it," he instructed gently. With trembling fingers, I broke the seal and removed the contents. A single check, made out to me, for $55 million. The room erupted in gasps. I stared at the check, certain I was misreading the amount. "This can't be real," I whispered. "It's very real," Grandpa confirmed. "And it's only the beginning. You can't do this." My mother's voice sliced through the chaos, high and panicked. She'd leapt to her feet, face contorted with outrage. "You can't just bypass your own son to give everything to her." "I can and I am, Catherine," he replied calmly. "My money, my choice." "This is about punishing me, isn't it?" my father demanded, his composure cracking. "Because I modernized the business instead of keeping it exactly as you built it." "This has nothing to do with business modernization, Richard. This is about character. About recognizing the true Wilson spirit lives on in Amber, not in those who simply bear the Wilson name while betraying its values." Harper had recovered enough to join the offensive. "Grandpa, you're clearly not thinking clearly. Amber has no business experience. She draws pictures of buildings for a living. How could she possibly handle this level of responsibility?" "With more grace and wisdom than you've demonstrated, I expect," he answered. "Stanford, please continue with the formal announcements." The attorney cleared his throat. "As Mr. Wilson has indicated, this initial distribution is merely preliminary. The full estate plan includes the establishment of the Wilson Legacy Trust, with primary controlling interest in all family business entities and properties. Miss Amber Wilson is named as sole trustee." The implications were staggering. This wasn't just about money. It was about control of everything the family had built over generations. "You're destroying everything we've worked for," my father shouted, abandoning all pretense of dignity. "On the contrary," Grandpa replied, "I'm saving it from those who never understood its true value." He turned to me again, his eyes both gentle and resolute. "Amber, I know this is overwhelming. You can decline if you wish. The contingency plan would direct everything to a charitable foundation instead." The room fell silent again, all eyes upon me as I stood there, still clutching the check that represented more money than I'd ever imagined possessing. "Why me?" I asked softly, the only question that truly mattered in that moment. "Because you understand that wealth is a responsibility, not a privilege," he answered. "Because you've demonstrated compassion without expectation of return. Because when you build something, you consider not just how it looks, but how it serves those who will depend on it." He paused, then added simply, "Because you're the best of us, Amber." For the first time in my life, I felt truly seen by my family. Not as the disappointment, the one who'd chosen a different path, but as someone worthy of respect. It had just come from the one person whose opinion had always mattered most. "I accept," I said quietly, my voice growing stronger as I repeated, "I accept the responsibility." My mother collapsed dramatically into her chair, while my father stormed toward the door, pausing only to glare at me with a mixture of rage and disbelief. Harper remained frozen, her carefully constructed world visibly crumbling around her. Grandpa Maxwell finally allowed himself to be helped back into his wheelchair, the effort of standing having clearly drained him. But his eyes remained clear and satisfied as Stanford continued outlining the details of what would become my new reality. The library door slammed violently behind my father, the sound reverberating through the suddenly silent room. For several heartbeats, no one moved or spoke. Then, like a dam breaking, chaos erupted. "This is a mistake," my mother declared, her voice brittle as she rose from her chair. "Maxwell, you cannot possibly believe this is appropriate. Richard has dedicated his life to this family." "To appearances, Catherine," Grandpa corrected firmly. "There's a difference." Harper remained unnaturally still, her practiced poise abandoned as she stared at me with naked hostility. "You planned this," she finally hissed. "All these years pretending you didn't care about the family business, acting so noble with your little buildings while secretly manipulating Grandpa." The accusation was so absurd, I almost laughed despite the tension. "Harper, I'm as shocked as you are." "Liar." She stood abruptly, sending her chair toppling backward. "You've always been jealous of me. Always playing the victim while plotting behind my back." Stanford Green intervened with practiced diplomatic skill. Perhaps we should take a brief recess to allow everyone to process this information. Mr. Wilson has had considerable time to think through these decisions, but I understand they come as a surprise to the family. Aunt Judith approached me as others began filtering out, her expression a mixture of concern and amusement. Well, that certainly livened up what I expected would be a dreadfully dull meeting. She squeezed my arm gently. For what it's worth, Maxwell got this right. You've always had substance over show. Uncle Thomas merely raised his coffee cup in a subtle toast from across the room before following the others out, leaving me alone with Grandpa Maxwell and Stanford. They'll try to challenge it, I said once the door closed behind the last relative. They can try, Stanford replied mildly. Every document is impeccable. Medical evaluations confirming your grandfather's sound mind were conducted by 3 independent specialists. The trust structure has been reviewed by the top legal minds in estate planning. Unless you choose to decline, this is ironclad. Grandpa gestured for me to sit beside him. I should have prepared you better, but I needed their genuine reactions. Needed you to see them clearly for who they are when the stakes are high. I've always seen them clearly, I said softly. I just stopped expecting anything different years ago. He patted my hand. There's more you should understand before they regroup and return with their arguments. The check is just the beginning, a personal gift to give you immediate independence. The full trust includes controlling interest in Wilson Financial Group, Lakeview Estate, the properties in New York, California, and Europe, and the investment portfolios. The scale was difficult to comprehend. Grandpa, I'm an architect, not a financial expert. I don't know how to run an investment firm. You don't need to personally manage daily operations. That's what qualified executives are for. What the company needs is someone with vision and integrity at the helm. The technical aspects can be learned or delegated. Stanford added, the trust includes provisions for a transition period with a board of advisors I've personally vetted. You won't be without guidance. There's one more element, Grandpa continued. I've allocated substantial funding for the Wilson Foundation for Community Architecture. The mission statement aligns with the work you've already been doing, creating sustainable, beautiful spaces for underserved communities. My eyes widened. This aligned so perfectly with my deepest professional ambitions that it momentarily overshadowed the inheritance itself. How did you know? I've barely discussed those ideas with anyone. A small smile played at his lips. I pay attention, Amber. Always have. Your graduate thesis on democratizing beautiful design for low-income housing. The pro bono projects you've taken on despite your firm's disapproval. The articles you've published under a pseudonym about architecture as social justice. You knew about those? I'd published those pieces as A.W. Stone, thinking no one had connected them to me. Little escapes me, especially when it concerns people I care about. His expression grew more serious. Which is why I also know exactly what Richard and Harper have been doing at the company. The corners cut. The people stepped on. The gradual erosion of everything I built it to stand for. The door burst open, interrupting our conversation as Harper strode back in, our mother trailing behind her. Harper had clearly been crying, but had reapplied her makeup and straightened her shoulders, back in control. I want to speak to Grandpa alone, she announced, then glared at me. Without you present. Before I could respond, Grandpa Maxwell spoke. Anything you wish to say can be said in front of Amber. She's trustee now. Fine. Harper's voice was ice. I want to know what lies she's been telling you about me. What distortions she's fed you to poison you against your actual business successor. Amber has never spoken a negative word about you to me, he replied calmly. She didn't need to. Your actions speak for themselves. What actions? Building the company to record profits? Securing international partnerships? Working 80-hour weeks while she plays with drafting paper? Falsifying environmental compliance reports on the Texas properties, he countered. Burying harassment complaints against executives who supported your advancement. Manipulating board members with selectively edited information. Shall I continue? The color drained from Harper's face. That's not. How did you? I built this company, girl. Did you really think I wouldn't keep an eye on it? That I wouldn't have loyal people still reporting to me? My mother stepped forward, her strategy shifting to appeal rather than demand. Maxwell, we're family. Whatever concerns you have can be addressed. But this public humiliation of Richard and Harper is unconscionable after everything they've sacrificed. Catherine, the only sacrifice I've witnessed is of principles for profit. He sighed, suddenly looking tired. I don't expect you to understand now. Perhaps you never will. But my decision stands. She'll destroy everything, Harper spat, pointing at me. She knows nothing about business. She knows everything about integrity, which is the foundation business should be built upon, he replied. Now I'm tired. This discussion is over. As if on cue, Jackson appeared at the door. Mr. Wilson needs to rest now. Doctor's orders. My mother and sister had no choice but to retreat, though Harper paused at the door to deliver a final barb. Enjoy your victory today. It won't last. After they left, I helped Grandpa back to his private suite, where his nurse was waiting. As I turned to leave him to rest, he caught my hand. They'll try to make you doubt yourself, he said quietly. Don't let them. I didn't make this decision lightly or recently. I've watched you for years, seen your character tested in ways they've never faced. You're ready for this, even if you don't believe it yet. I squeezed his hand gently. Thank you for believing in me when no one else did. Not believing. Knowing. He smiled tiredly. Now go. You have a lot to think about, and they'll be regrouping for their next approach. Stand firm, Amber. The hardest part of leadership is maintaining your course when everyone is demanding you change direction. As I left his room, I felt a strange new sense of confidence beneath the lingering shock. For the first time in my life, I wasn't the family disappointment. I was the Wilson heir, chosen not by birth order or parental preference, but on merit. The responsibility was enormous, but so was the validation. I retreated to the lakeside gazebo, one of my favorite spots on the property, to process everything that had happened. The check remained in my pocket, still surreal in its implications. Financial independence. Freedom from ever having to worry about project funding or firm politics again. The ability to create the kind of architectural practice I'd only dreamed about, but with it came complications I hadn't anticipated. Family relationships already strained would likely be permanently damaged. Leadership responsibilities I'd never sought would demand attention. A legacy I'd long ago accepted wasn't mine to continue would now fall squarely on my shoulders. As the sun began to set over the lake, casting golden reflections across the water, I heard footsteps on the path behind me. Turning, I found Aunt Judith approaching with 2 glasses of whiskey. Thought you might need this, she said, offering me one. It's been quite a day. I accepted gratefully. That's putting it mildly. She settled beside me on the bench. You know they're up there plotting right now. Richards called the family attorney. Harper's going through old emails looking for anything she can use against you. Catherine's already called 3 board members. How do you know all this? She smiled cryptically. I've always found it advantageous to be underestimated in this family. People say remarkable things when they think you're just dotty Aunt Judith who never had a head for business. I laughed despite myself. Have you been spying for Grandpa all these years? Let's just say Maxwell and I have always had an understanding. We both value substance over show. She sipped her whiskey. They'll come at you with everything they have. Are you prepared for that? The question hung in the air as I considered what lay ahead. The family I'd grown up with had effectively declared war on me today. The path forward would be challenging in ways I couldn't yet fully comprehend. I don't know, I answered honestly, but I know I can't turn away from this responsibility. Not just because of Grandpa's faith in me, but because I've seen what happens when power is wielded without compassion or integrity. Judith nodded approvingly. That's exactly why Maxwell chose you. She raised her glass. To the new era of Wilson leadership. May it be guided by stronger principles than the last. As we clinked glasses, I felt something shift within me. The shock and uncertainty weren't gone, but alongside them grew a resolute determination. If this was to be my path, I would walk it with the integrity Grandpa Maxwell had recognized in me, regardless of the storms that lay ahead. Sunday morning at Lakeview Estate dawned with an atmospheric tension so thick it felt like a physical presence. I'd slept fitfully, my dreams filled with swirling numbers and Harper's accusing face. When I finally gave up on rest around 6, I changed into running clothes and headed for the trails surrounding the property, hoping physical exertion might clear my head. The familiar paths helped ground me as I processed yesterday's seismic shift in my family's dynamics. By the time I returned, sweaty but calmer, the house was stirring to life. I showered quickly and steeled myself for whatever confrontations the day might bring. The breakfast room fell silent when I entered. My parents and Harper sat huddled at one end of the table, papers spread between them, their conversation cutting off abruptly at my appearance. Other family members occupied the remaining seats, the atmosphere uncomfortably divided between those stealing curious glances my way and others studiously avoiding eye contact. "Good morning," I said, serving myself coffee from the sideboard. No one responded except Aunt Judith, who cheerfully raised her teacup in greeting. I took a seat beside her, accepting a plate of fresh fruit Jackson quietly placed before me. "Sleep well?" Judith asked conversationally, ignoring the palpable tension. "Well enough, considering." My father cleared his throat. "Amber, we need to speak privately after breakfast." "My office, 30 minutes." His tone made it a command rather than a request. Before I could respond, Grandpa Maxwell was wheeled in by his nurse. Despite yesterday's exertions, he looked remarkably refreshed, dressed impeccably in slacks and a cashmere sweater. "Good morning, family," he announced, his voice strong. "Beautiful day, isn't it?" The strained small talk that followed was almost comical in its awkwardness. Weather was discussed with the intensity of international diplomacy. Cousin Patrick's golf game received unwarranted attention. Uncle Thomas suddenly found the estate's antique silverware fascinating. As breakfast concluded, Stanford Green appeared in the doorway. "Mr. Wilson, the documents are prepared as requested." "Excellent." Grandpa nodded. "Amber, would you join us in the study? The rest of you are welcome as well, of course." My father stood immediately. "Dad, we'd planned to discuss matters with Amber first." "I'm sure whatever you wish to discuss can wait, Richard. Legal matters take precedence." The study had been transformed overnight. Additional chairs arranged in a semicircle, a projector set up, and several leather portfolios placed at specific seats. Stanford directed me to a chair beside Grandpa's position at the head of the arrangement. Once everyone was seated, Stanford began a formal presentation outlining the Wilson Legacy Trust in exhaustive detail. Flowcharts illustrated the new corporate structure. Graphs depicted the asset allocations. Timelines established the transition process. The technical jargon was occasionally beyond my expertise, but the fundamental message was clear. Effective immediately, I would oversee everything through the trust, with professional management teams handling day-to-day operations of each business entity. My parents and Harper would retain their current positions initially, but would report to new oversight boards. "This is corporate kidnapping," my father interrupted when Stanford reached the section on accountability measures. "You can't possibly expect us to accept this restructuring without legal challenge." "Challenge all you wish," Stanford replied mildly. "Every aspect has been vetted by the country's top estate attorneys. The trusts are irrevocable. Mr. Wilson's mental competence is extensively documented. The business transitions comply with all corporate bylaws and shareholder agreements." Amber, my mother, tried a different approach, her voice softening to the tone she'd used when trying to convince me to attend certain social functions in my teens. "Surely you see how this places you in an impossible position. You have no experience with these responsibilities. It would be in everyone's best interest if you declined this burden." Is that what you really think, Mom? That I'm incapable? Of course not, darling. You're very talented in your field. This is simply not your field. Perhaps it should have been, Grandpa interjected. If you'd seen her potential instead of only Harper's. My sister, who had remained unnaturally quiet throughout the presentation, finally spoke. This isn't about talent. It's about dedication. I've given everything to this company while Amber chose to pursue her own interests. Now she gets rewarded for that with control of what I've helped build? How is that fair? Fair, I repeated, finding my voice. Was it fair when you took credit for my designs for the Wilson Financial Headquarters expansion when we were in college? When you presented my environmental efficiency concepts to the board as your own after dismissing them when I originally proposed them? When you built your reputation on others' work while undermining them? Harper flinched. That's not what happened. It is exactly what happened. I have the original designs dated and witnessed. I kept copies of every email where you dismissed my ideas, followed by the board presentations where you proposed them as your own months later. You kept documentation? All this time. Her expression shifted from defensive to betrayed. You were building a case against me? Your own sister. I was protecting myself, I corrected. There's a difference. My father stood abruptly. This is going nowhere. Stanford, prepare the paperwork for our legal team's review. We'll be contesting these changes formally. As is your right, Stanford acknowledged. Though I should mention that Mr. Wilson anticipated this response. The trust includes provisions that any family member who legally contests the arrangements is automatically removed from all positions within Wilson Companies and forfeits any future distributions. The color drained from my father's face. That's coercion. That's consequence, Grandpa corrected. Something you've rarely faced, Richard. The meeting dissolved into tense silence. As family members began filing out, my mother paused beside my chair. You could fix this, she whispered urgently. You could make this right. This is right, Mom. Maybe not comfortable, but right. She left without another word, following my father and Harper, who hadn't even glanced back. When only Grandpa, Stanford, and I remained, I finally asked the question weighing heaviest on my mind. What happens now? Practically speaking. Stanford opened one of the portfolios. Transition begins immediately. The announcement to company leadership is scheduled for Wednesday. Your formal orientation starts next Monday. Between now and then, I suggest you review these materials and prepare for significant resistance. They'll try to undermine me at every turn. Without question, Grandpa agreed. Which is why you need allies. He nodded to Stanford, who produced another folder. This contains profiles of executives across all Wilson entities who have demonstrated both exceptional competence and uncompromising integrity. Some have been sidelined by the current leadership precisely because they wouldn't bend rules or participate in questionable practices. They will be invaluable during your transition. I spent the remainder of the day sequestered in my room, reviewing the materials Stanford had provided. The scope of what I was taking on became increasingly clear, both exhilarating and terrifying in its magnitude. Around 6, a soft knock at my door revealed Aunt Judith. Dinner's become a war zone downstairs, she reported. Thought you might prefer a tray up here while you work. Thank you, I said gratefully as she arranged the covered dishes on my small table. Your parents and Harper left about an hour ago, she continued, settling into a chair. Stormed out dramatically after your grandfather refused to discuss reasonable compromises. I'm not surprised. She studied me thoughtfully. What will you do, Amber? Really do, once the dust settles and this becomes your new reality. The question made me pause. Beyond the immediate crisis and transition, what vision did I have for this unexpected responsibility? Realign the companies with Grandpa's original values, I said slowly, the ideas forming as I spoke. Use our resources and influence to create sustainable, ethical business models. Integrate my architectural background to develop community-focused initiatives. And your family? I sighed, the weight of broken relationships heavy despite the excitement of new possibilities. I don't know. I can't force them to accept this. No, she agreed. But you can set terms for moving forward that honor both your grandfather's wishes and your own principles. That night, I drafted what would essentially become my manifesto for the future of Wilson Enterprises. By morning, I had a clear vision that married my architectural passion with business responsibility, ethical leadership with innovation. I would build something new on the foundation Grandpa had established, something that honored his legacy while reflecting my own values. When I presented my ideas to him later that day, his eyes filled with tears. This, he said, tapping the document, is exactly why you were the right choice. You see beyond profit to purpose. Over the next 2 days, I worked with Stanford and Grandpa to refine the transition plan. On Tuesday evening, my parents and Harper returned, looking grim but composed. We need to talk, my father announced. All of us, calmly and rationally. In the library once again, they presented their counterproposal. I would remain nominal trustee, but delegate all actual authority back to them. In exchange, they would allow me significant funding for architectural projects and public recognition as a Wilson heir. That defeats the entire purpose, I replied when they finished. This isn't about money or titles. It's about values and vision. Don't be naive, Harper scoffed. It's always about money and power. Perhaps for you, I acknowledged. But not for me, and not for Grandpa when he built all this. I slid my own proposal across the table. These are my terms for working together moving forward. They're non-negotiable, but they do include meaningful roles for each of you if you choose to accept them. My father scanned the document, his expression darkening. Oversight committees? Ethics reviews? Community investment requirements? This is absurd. It's the future of Wilson Enterprises, I corrected. With or without your participation. You can't possibly succeed without us, my mother insisted. You need our experience, our connections. I'd prefer to have them, I admitted honestly. I'd prefer us to find a way forward as a family. But I won't compromise on the fundamental principles. We reached no resolution that night, or the next day. When I left for Boston on Wednesday to prepare for the official announcement, the divide remained vast between us. Yet something had shifted within me. The desperate need for their approval that had defined so much of my life had been replaced by something stronger, confidence in my own vision and values. Whether they eventually came around or remained estranged, I would move forward on the path Grandpa had entrusted to me. They'll either adapt or they won't, Grandpa said during our goodbye. But you must stay the course, Amber. That's the true test of leadership. I hugged him carefully, aware of his fragility, despite his formidable spirit. I won't let you down. You never have, he replied simply. That's why we're here. As my car pulled away from Lakeview Estate, I glanced back at the imposing house that had witnessed our family's most dramatic upheaval. For the first time, I drove away not as the overlooked daughter, but as the chosen heir, not because of birthright, but because of character. The road ahead would be challenging, but I was finally ready to build something worthy of the foundation I'd been given. 6 months passed in a whirlwind of transitions, challenges, and unexpected triumphs. The autumn leaves had turned to winter snow and melted into spring renewal, mirroring the transformative journey I'd undertaken since that fateful weekend at Lakeview Estate. My office in the redesigned East Wing of Wilson Tower offered panoramic views of Boston Harbor, though I rarely had time to appreciate them. The initial months had been a crash course in corporate governance, financial management, and leadership under the guidance of Stanford Green and the team of ethical executives Grandpa had identified. The Wilson Foundation for Community Architecture had moved from concept to reality with remarkable speed. Today marked the groundbreaking ceremony for our first major project, a mixed-use development in South Boston featuring affordable housing, community spaces, and innovative green technology. The designs incorporated everything I'd advocated for throughout my architectural career, now finally possible with proper funding and institutional support. Ms. Wilson, they're ready for you downstairs, my assistant Grace announced, interrupting my moment of reflection. "Thank you. I'll be right down." I smoothed my navy dress, adjusted my grandmother's pearls that Grandpa had given me as a transition gift, and gathered the speech I'd prepared for today's ceremony. As I headed for the elevator, I passed the newly installed mission statement etched in glass along the main corridor, building structures of integrity, communities of purpose, and legacies of value. The journey to this moment had been neither smooth nor simple. As predicted, my parents and Harper had initially attempted to undermine my authority through back channels, reaching out to board members and key clients to question my competence. The strategy backfired when I addressed their concerns directly and transparently, establishing credibility through honesty rather than defensiveness. By the third month, a tentative truce had formed. My father, recognizing the inevitability of the transition, had grudgingly accepted a position on the International Development Committee where his experience remained valuable but his authority limited. My mother had withdrawn from direct business involvement, focusing instead on maintaining social connections that occasionally proved useful to our initiatives. Harper had proven the most complicated case. After several failed attempts to circumvent the new structure, she'd abruptly resigned, announcing plans to start her own competing firm. 3 months later, struggling to establish herself without the Wilson resources and reputation, she'd returned with a request to rejoin under the new terms. Her business acumen remained sharp. It was only her ethics that had needed recalibration. "We can use your skills," I told her during that tense meeting, "but only with complete transparency and accountability." "You're enjoying this, aren't you?" she'd asked bitterly. "Having me at your mercy after all these years." "This isn't about revenge, Harper. It's about rebuilding something better than what came before." Our relationship remained strained but professional. Small moments of genuine connection had begun to emerge, particularly when her innovative market analysis had significantly improved one of our housing initiatives. The simple, "good work" I'd offered had visibly startled her, perhaps the first unqualified praise she'd received without manipulation or agenda attached. The elevator doors opened onto the lobby, which hummed with activity. Community members, investors, journalists, and employees gathered for the groundbreaking ceremony. Grandpa Maxwell sat in his wheelchair near the front, his health somewhat improved now that the burden of his concerns had lifted. He caught my eye and offered a proud smile that warmed me more than any corporate achievement could. "There she is." Aunt Judith approached, elegant as always in a spring suit. "The woman of the hour." Hardly I demurred. "This is about the community and the team, not me." "Spoken like a true Wilson," she approved. "The real kind, not the imposters we've endured in recent decades." As I moved through the crowd, accepting congratulations and answering questions, I noticed my parents standing awkwardly near the refreshment table. Their attendance today had been uncertain until the last minute. Our interactions remained formal, wounds still healing slowly. But their presence represented progress, however tentative. "Amber," my mother greeted me with a reserved smile. "Everything looks lovely. Thank you for coming," I replied sincerely. "It means a lot." My father nodded stiffly. The quarterly projections looked strong. The board was impressed. Coming from him, this constituted effusive praise. The ethical restructuring actually improved our market position. "Turns out integrity is good business." "So your grandfather always claimed," he acknowledged, a flicker of something like regret crossing his features. Before the conversation could continue, Stanford signaled that it was time to begin the ceremony. I took my place at the podium, looking out at the gathered crowd that represented both my past and the future I was helping to build. 6 months ago, I never imagined standing here today, I began candidly. My path seemed set in a different direction. But life's greatest opportunities often arrive disguised as unexpected challenges. As I outlined the vision for the development project, emphasizing its community impact rather than its innovative design or financial structure, I caught Grandpa nodding approvingly. He had taught me that true success wasn't measured in dollars or accolades, but in positive impact on others' lives. After the formal speeches and symbolic turning of dirt with gold-painted shovels, I found a moment alone with Grandpa away from the mingling crowd. "You've exceeded every expectation," he said, patting my hand. "In 6 months, you've accomplished what I feared might take years." "I've had excellent guidance," I replied, "and a pretty compelling example to follow." He shook his head. "Don't discount your own merit, Amber. I merely recognized what was already there. You've taken everything I built and are making it better, stronger, more meaningful. There's still so much to do. The international restructuring, the ethical supply chain initiative, the apprenticeship program. All in good time," he counseled. "Remember what I told you about building foundations? Rush them and everything above will eventually crumble." The wisdom resonated deeply, connecting my architectural training with the broader leadership principles I was still mastering. "I just want to make you proud." "You already have," he said simply. "But more importantly, are you proud of yourself?" The question gave me pause. For so long, my sense of worth had been tied to external validation that I'd rarely considered my own assessment. Now, looking back at the past 6 months of challenges met and principles maintained, I could answer honestly. Yes, I realized. I am. "Then you've already succeeded at the most important task." His eyes twinkled with the familiar wisdom that had guided me since childhood. "Everything else is just details." As the event concluded and guests departed, I found myself reflecting on the extraordinary journey that had brought me here. The painful family dynamics that had shaped my early life had transformed into something more complex, but ultimately healthier. The professional insecurities I'd harbored had given way to quiet confidence. The inheritance that had initially seemed overwhelming had become a platform for meaningful change. My phone chimed with a message from Logan, the community-centered director I'd been working closely with on the project's social impact components. Our professional relationship had recently begun showing hints of something more personal, another unexpected development in this year of transformations. "Great speech," his text read. "Dinner later to celebrate?" I smiled as I typed my acceptance, another small step in building a life that balanced professional purpose with personal fulfillment. The Wilson legacy would continue, but reshaped by values stronger than mere wealth accumulation or power consolidation. My grandfather had seen in me not just the ability to preserve what he'd built, but to transform it into something better aligned with its original purpose. As I prepared to leave the construction site that would soon become a vibrant community space, I paused to watch Grandpa chatting animatedly with some of the local residents who would benefit from the project. The true measure of wealth, I'd come to understand, wasn't in what you accumulated, but in what you built that outlasted you. What lessons have you learned about true value in your own life? Has someone recognized potential in you that others missed? I'd love to hear your stories in the comments below. And if this journey of unexpected inheritance and finding your own path resonated with you, please like, subscribe, and share with others who might need a reminder that sometimes the greatest gifts come disguised as challenges. Thank you for joining me today on this reflection, and remember, legacies aren't just inherited. They're built, one choice at a time.